By 2030, 1 in 25 Australian homes will be uninsurable. Why? Because we are facing a climate crisis. However, the good news is Australia actually has made some big changes over the past 12 months, which I've got to say make me very excited for what's going on with power generation here in this country. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the channel. I'm the Electric Viking. Great to see you. Just had a fantastic weekend. My boys have raced in the state races here in BMX. They did really well. Jack came third. For Cal's age, they don't give them an official position, but he came around about third or second or third in most of his races. He did really well as well. It was a great day. Thank you to those of you who have subscribed to their channel, supported them. I really appreciate your support. By the way, I'm on that channel too. I'll put a link in the description below to their YouTube channel. Thank you all for subscribing to this channel as well. Really appreciate your support. So what is going on here in Australia? Well, according to numerous climate reports, 1 in either 25 to 30 homes in Australia will be uninsurable by 2030 thanks to the climate crisis. Yes, it is a significant issue in Australia. But what is happening here in Australia? Well, a number of things are happening. Things have changed drastically. And I mean drastically over the past 12 months here. Are we ignoring the climate crisis? Actually, no, we're not. Now, the media would have you believe that here in Australia, all we do is pollute and nothing is getting better. Things could not be further from the truth. Last year, 2021, it was a record year. Not for bad news, but actually for good news. Renewables provided 5 times more power than gas in 2021 in Australia. In addition to that, South Australia just broke a record by running on renewable energy entirely, nothing else, just renewable energy for a week. Now, what is so significant about that is that South Australia, right, where Tesla's big battery is, receives no energy from hydropower. So, as far as we can tell, South Australia was the only place in the world that has run entirely on renewable energy from solar and wind for a week. Record there. That's insane. The state's previous record was 3 days. And amazingly, for those 7 days, which were the start of this year, South Australia produced on average 101% of the energy it needed from wind, rooftop solar, and solar farms. This is why this actually matters, why this is actually very, very significant. Bruce Mountain, director of the Victoria Energy Policy Centre, said that aside from some small island grids, such as those in Hawaii and Tasmania, where Tasmania runs on mostly hydropower, so it's a different story, South Australia was the only advanced economy in the world to have run only on the solar and wind generation for an entire week. This is a record, historical record. Part of this record was possible. Why? Well, because Tesla has energy storage in the state. Not just Tesla, but of course, that's been supported by the state of South Australia. So kudos to them as well for that. But it was possible because of what? Because of a government that understands logic, that understands where the future is going. That is renewable energy. During this unprecedented 160-hour renewable energy run, the share of wind was 64.4% of all energy, rooftop solar 29.5%, and utility scale solar 6.2%. So here you can see, right? You guys are the difference. You Australians that are getting rooftop solar, you've accounted for way more than utility scale solar. Essentially, 30% of all energy generated for that week came from just people like you and me who have installed solar panels on their roofs. It does make a difference. So the thing is, Australia often receives poor international press regarding its climate policies. However, our uptake here of renewables is receiving international attention for what? For how well it's going. A recent episode of a podcast by the Energy Gang, which is produced in the US by global energy consultants Wood Mackenzie, focused on Australia's success in incorporating renewables into our grid to a total of 24% of all the energy we use. That's incredible. And it highlighted the uptake of grid-scale batteries that both store renewable energy when it is not needed and help to stabilize a system originally built to transmit power from huge providers such as coal power stations. Our energy matrix is completely changing here in Australia. Firidun Sershantsi, a US-based energy analyst, says Australia has driven down the cost of renewables and in particular solar power, not only with feed-in tariffs, which leave owners of solar systems paid for the power they feed back to the grid, but also with efficient regulation. Now, comparably with the United States, for example, in parts of the US, many state governments have introduced fees that are slowing down solar uptake after lobbying from utility companies. This is essentially corruption at the oil and gas level, right? Lobbying from utility companies affects what's happening to end users. They're having to pay more, right, to get solar installed. Figures from the International Renewable Energy Agency show that the cost of installing residential solar in Australia is similar to that of nations with far cheaper labour costs, such as Thailand and Malaysia, and it's much cheaper than in the US and Europe. So we do criticize our governments all the time, but now we've got to have to say, guys, no, hold back here. Let's stop the criticisms. Let's actually be aware of what we're doing that is good. And this, my friends, is really good. I've got to say, I'm super excited to see just what we are doing here as a nation when it comes to renewable energy. It's going to be amazing because by the time we get to say 2035, there won't be any more coal power. Gas is just dying quickly here in Australia. Coal, it's going to die a fast death. And I say sucked in to all those idiots who invested in coal power stations. They should have seen the numbers. All they had to do was watch, right? Watch, there's YouTube channels talking about what exactly is going on globally right now, in particular in Australia with coal-fired power stations. If these places don't run at 70% capacity, they lose money. And most of them are not running at 70% right now. Professor Mountain said despite missteps over the years or bad decisions, South Australia's success in renewable energy was due to a consistent, bipartisan, yes, both sides of politics agreeing, determination to speed up energy transition to renewables. He said the state had advantages in its transition because it was a small market with good connections to Victoria. What does this mean? Ultimately, progress is being made towards the South Australian government's plan to become a net exporter of renewable power via interconnectors and a future green hydrogen industry. So, what does this mean? Well, they're saying there's going to be so much excess renewable power in South Australia, they're just going to go, okay, let's use this to create green hydrogen because otherwise it gets wasted. That's the brilliant thing with renewable energy, right? You have hot days. South Australia is a particularly hot area. You have excess energy. You go, okay, bang, we're going to use this to create more energy. Here's another story of just what's going on here in Australia. Tesla announced the expansion of its virtual power plant, powered by its Powerwall, to several new states and regions in Australia. Australia, and especially South Australia, has had a lot of power issues over the years, as it's been retiring old, aging infrastructure and managing a high penetration of renewable energy. As many of you know, Tesla first got involved by supplying its power pack in a large energy storage project owned by Noen that became known as the Tesla Big Battery. Now, this big battery was mocked by our president, our prime minister, who was an idiot. He had no idea what he was talking about because it worked really, really well to the point where, the company who owns the battery decided, let's double the size. This thing's working so well. While in that area, during the launch of the big battery, Tesla CEO Elon Musk was interviewed and he was presented with the significant hardship that Australia's high electricity prices are putting on low-income families at that time. The unstable grid and high electricity costs result in some families having to decide between keeping the lights on or going hungry. Musk was clearly emotionally affected by this issue, and he said Tesla would work harder to help solve this issue. They did. He was serious. A few months later, Tesla announced that he'd reached a deal with the South Australian government to install solar arrays and power walls on up to 50,000 homes, many of them homes of low-income families. Over the last few years, Tesla has been deploying more power walls to grow this virtual power plant, which provides grid services to reduce cost and backup power in case of a power outage. In return, the home battery packs are subsidized and reduce energy costs for these households to being really, really low. In 2020, Tesla had 1,000 power walls on the network, and they were authorized for a new phase to add another 3,000 batteries. A year later, the Tesla Energy Plan on the Tesla Virtual Power Plant was launched, which is basically a time of use energy plan specifically made for Powerwall owners in South Australia. Then last year, Tesla announced it was expanding its Tesla Energy Plan and its Tesla Virtual Power Plant in Victoria, making one of the biggest batteries in the world. Now Tesla is announcing another expansion of its virtual power plant to other states in Australia and to regions around South Australia and Victoria. Quote, Australia's largest virtual power plant has expanded to New South Wales, Southeast Queensland, and the ACT with the Tesla Energy Plan. What does this mean? Well, Tesla Powerwall owners or new buyers in those regions can now decide to opt into the virtual power plant. This is one of the main ways in which Tesla's energy division is slowly becoming a global decentralized energy provider, which is one of the stated goals of Tesla Energy, according to CEO Elon Musk. So yes, if you think Tesla are just a car company, think again. They are not just a car company. They will become one of the largest energy suppliers in the world because eventually, guess what? All of the world will use renewable energy, and it'll come down to one reason: logic, mathematics, cost. Cost keeps coming down. And if you watch this channel regularly, you watch all my videos, you'll be aware of exactly what's happening here and why. Why is this interesting? People have long claimed that it is impossible to run a grid purely on intermittent renewables. And you always will need gas or hydro or geothermal to firm it. Well, Adelaide, South Australia has proven this is bogus. It's false and it's wrong. South Australia only has solar and wind as renewables. They have zero hydro. Guess what? It shut down its last coal plant in 2016. Gas is the only fossil generation source. Last month, 76% of all electricity in South Australia came from solar and wind. That's a record. And this is the highest renewable percentage of energy in the world generated from solar and wind only. However, what's crazy, right? This is growing fast. Only a year earlier, that figure was 69%. South Australia is on track to become the first grid in the world to be 90% plus renewable without any hydro at all. I mean, in Tasmania, they have heaps of hydro, heaps of power, because there's plenty of rivers to get all this hydro energy. South Australia doesn't have this luxury. However, it doesn't need it. It's proving here in this really world first scenario that renewable energy is unquestionably the answer to the world's movement away from burning fossil fuels and towards using renewable energy. In addition to this, remember, Australia has vast reserves of iron, huge reserves of lithium, and also reserves of phosphorus, all the ingredients of LFP batteries, and even iron flow batteries as well. Here in Australia, we could actually be a battery exporter in addition. Let's end this on an even more positive note. Renewables provided 5 times more power into Australia's largest grid than gas in 2021. And they've reached records in every single state in Australia in 2021, while gas generation fell down to its lowest level in more than 15 years. And this was despite no change in electricity demand here in Australia. Here's what Tim Baxter from the Climate Council had to say. The increase in solar, wind and batteries in our electricity system is making power bills cheaper for Australian households and businesses. Electricity is now the cheapest it has been in a decade, and we have solar and wind to thank for that. Let's be clear though, this record has nothing to do with the federal government, which has been missing in action and leaving all of the heavy lifting to the states and territories. When you look at the data and what renewables are doing for Australians' hip pockets, in other words, making it cheaper, the push for gas from the Morrison government seems increasingly irresponsible and economically reckless. In New South Wales, gas provided just 1.5% of the state's power, the lowest level in 15 years. Why is this? Well, because according to the Climate Research Institute, gas simply cannot compete with renewable energy in terms of cost. This is bringing down power prices for consumers and creating a cleaner, healthier energy system. For example, renewable energy generation has more than doubled in Western Australia during the last 3 years alone. Renewable energy generation increased by almost 20% in 2021, with a 30% jump in Victoria and a 26% jump in Western Australia. In 2021, renewable energy made up 31.5% of all energy across the entire country of Australia. In Tasmania, it was 99.9%. South Australia, 66%. Of course, this year it's increased to 75%. Victoria, 32%. New South Wales, 25%. Queensland, 19%. And Western Australia, 33%. By the end of this decade, we're going to be looking at close to 90% renewable energy generation in this country. That's my prediction. And I believe I will be proven right. Thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye-bye.